Well, greetings and welcome to the next installment of Pastor Eric Christmas Stories. It is really good to spend this time with you, just going through stories and hymns and different things that help draw us into the meaning of Christmas. And today's story does it in a little bit different way. It's a short story called The Little Match Girl. It's by Hans Christian Andersen. I said a little bit more about him in the blog. And it's not a happy kind of story, but it's a story that talks about what the meaning of life is and about our life after we no longer live. So let me read it to you, The Little Match Girl. Once upon a time. All good stories begin with once upon a time. Most terribly cold it was. It snowed and was nearly quite dark and evening, the last evening of the year. In the cold and darkness there went along the street a poor little girl, bareheaded and with naked feet. When she left home she had slippers on, it's true, but what good is that? There were very large slippers which her mother had worn. So large were they, and the little poor thing lost them as she scuffled away along the street because of two carriages that rolled by dreadfully fast. One slipper was nowhere to be found. The other had been laid hold of by an urchin, and off he ran with it. He thought he could do something for it someday should he have children himself. So the little maiden walked on her tiny naked feet. They were quite red and blue from cold. She carried a quantity of matches in an old apron, and she held a bundle of them in her hand. Nobody had bought anything of her the whole livelong day. Nobody had given her a single farthing, which is an amount of money. She crept along trembling with cold and hunger, a very picture of sorrow, the poor little thing. The flakes of snow covered her fair, long hair, which fell in beautiful curls around her neck, but that, of course, she never once thought of now. From the windows the candles were gleaming, and it smelt so deliciously of roast goose, for you know it was New Year's Eve. Yes, of that she thought. In a corner formed by two houses, of which one was more advanced than the other, she seated herself down and cowered together. Her little feet she had drawn up close up to her, but she grew colder and colder, and had to go home. She did not venture, for she had not sold any matches, and could not bring a farthing home of money, for her father would certainly give blows to her, and at home it was cold too, for above her she had only one roof, though the wind whistled, even through the largest cracks were stopped up with straw and rags. Her little hands were almost numbed with cold. Oh, a match might afford her a world of comfort. If only she dared take a single one out of the bundle, draw it up against the wall, and warm her fingers with it. She drew one out, struck it. Oh, how it blazed, how it burned. It was a warm, bright flame, like a candle, as she held her hands over it. It was a wonderful light. It seemed really to the little maiden as though she were sitting before a large iron stove with burnished brass feet and a brass ornament on top. The fire burned from that match with such blessed influence. It warmed so delightfully. The little girl had already stretched out her feet to warm them too, but the small flame went out. The stove vanished. She had only the remains of the burnt out match in her hand. She rubbed another against the wall. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall, there on the wall became transparent like a veil, so that she could almost see into the room. On the table was spread a snow-white tablecloth. Upon it was a splendid porcelain service, and a roast goose was steaming famously with the stuffing of apples and dried plums. And what was still more capital to behold was The goose hopped down from the dish, reeled about on the floor, she's imagining all this, with a knife and fork in its breast, till it came up to the little girl when the match went out. The match went out, and nothing but the thick, cold, damp wall was left behind. She lighted another match. Now, there she was sitting under the most magnificent Christmas tree, and once again imagining. It was still larger and more decorated than the one which she had seen through the glass door in a rich merchant's house. Thousands of lights were burning on the green branches and gaily colored pictures such as she had seen in the shop windows looking all down upon her. The little maiden stretched out her hand toward them, but then the match went out. The light of the Christmas tree rose higher and higher. She saw them now as stars in heaven. One fell down and formed a long trail of fire. "Someone is just dead," said the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only person who had loved her and who now was no more, had told her that when a star falls, a soul ascends to heaven. She drew out another match against the wall. It was again light, and in the luster there stood in her old grandmother. Her old grandmother is so bright and radiant, so mild, and with such expression of love. Once again, she imagined seeing her grandmother. "Grandmother," cried the little one, "oh, take me with you. You go away when the match burns out. You vanish like the warm stove, like the delicious roast goose, like the magnificent Christmas tree." And she rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wanted to be quite sure of keeping her grandmother near her. And the matches gave such brilliant light that it was brighter than all the noonday. Never formerly had the grandmother been so beautiful and so tall. The grandmother took the little maiden on her arm, and both flew in brightness and joy, so high, so very high, and then above was neither cold nor hunger nor anxiety. They were both with God. But in a corner, as that cold hour of dawn began, sat the poor girl, with rosy cheeks and a smiling mouth, leaning up against the wall, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. Stiff and stark sat the child there with her matches, of which one bundle had been burnt. She wanted to warm herself, people said. No one had the slightest suspicion of what beautiful things she had seen. No one had even dreamed of the splendor in which, with her grandmother, she had entered the joys of a new year. Really a sad story, and yet we know where the child of the manger ends up as the Christ of the cross. We know that while she was going to be with her grandmother, we one day will go to be with God. One day death will be no more, and life will be eternal and glorious for us, all because of Jesus, the baby born in a manger. Let's close in prayer. Dear God, when the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with the flocks, then the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken in spirit, to feed the hungry, to release the oppressed and rebuild the nations, to bring peace among all people, to make a little music with the heart, and to radiate the light of Christ every day in every way in all that we do and all that we say. Then the work of Christmas begins. Amen. All right, you take care, and I look forward to being with you for the next Christmas story with Pastor Eric. You take care. Bye-bye.